Welcome to another episode of On the Mic with Ed. You are here with myself, Maria Ortiz, our co host, Dr. Zoe Ross Nash, and our guest today, which is Dr. Haley Johnson. So, today we're going to be primarily talking about the crossover between college students and eating disorders, anything that's maybe specialized to that population. Dr. Haley Johnson does a lot of work with this community, so we're really, really grateful to have her on board with us today.
I'm
Thank
so
you
happy
so
you're
much.
here, Haley. So a little bit more about Haley's background. She is the Eating Disorder Care Team Coordinator at Southern Illinois University, and she was also trained at the Renfrew Center, which is the Eating Disorder Treatment Center, one of the largest in the country at their residential and inpatient center. And Haley has had multiple years of working with college students and particularly within the eating disorder community. So as I said, we're so happy that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, we are too. So why don't to get us started, what would you say maybe is the difference between people who have eating disorders and then specifically people who have eating disorders and our college students?
Yeah, so like symptomology wise, they all look very similar. The thing that I have found in like the last 5 years is that it can get tricky at where they start because we have a lot of students who may come in with eating disorder behaviors, and then the space from their family gets them comfortable and allows those things to progress. We also have students who get to college and it's like this social situation, a social pressure. You think everybody's looking at you and judging you, and you have to make friends, and maybe you're not from this like the area. And then they get self-conscious, and then those eating disorder behaviors kind of kick in. So it's kind of like trying to figure out where it started, if it's something that's been going on for a while, or if it's something that started solely from the college situation. And then the other thing that we bump into is that like we work with them for a semester and then they go home for break. So if it is something that started at home, or if they do have, like an almond mom or whatever, those behaviors, they might have been working and progressing so well over the last semester with that space from family. And then they go home and it's like, and then they come back and they're like, everything sucked and I'm awful and I'm the worst. And we're like, no, no, you're great. You did a good job. It was to be expected. And they're like, this is awful. So it's the presentation themselves look very similar, obviously, because it's like the DSM and all that stuff, but how kind of like pinpointing where we're at and how long they've had these behaviors and kind of where it began, I feel like is really what separates the college life from, your general eating disorder population, because it is kind of like a bubble.
Sounds like you're really highlighting this difference of kind of yeah, when did this eating disorder come about? Do you notice a strong difference in the prognosis for when the onset of the eating disorder occurred?
Oh, like every psychological answer, it really depends. That's probably the most psychological answer that I could ever give you. It depends on how comfortable they are in the behaviors, whether it is something that they started at college and have just committed to, or if it's something that they've started and now feel comfortable doing it without anybody watching. Um, it's and they have quite the level of commitment that I have seen. Um, but I have worked with students who we catch them right at the beginning, which is nice. And it's not a full-blown eating disorder at this point, it's disordered eating. And we can kind of provide that psychoeducation and provide that space where they feel comfortable talking about their body image, their relationship with food, and things like that. And we've got students on the further end where they are very much so into it. And I have had conversations with these college students about higher levels of care and what that looks like and how we might start that process. So it depends on the student and how much so they are in it.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is that coming to college can either be a risk factor or a protective factor. Either the eating disorder can really be exacerbated because, hey, we're alone, we don't have anyone monitoring us, we have a lot of opportunities to maintain secrets. Or it could be a protective factor because maybe we're away from the environment that we got sick in. That makes so much sense to me.
And that's something that like I feel like generally when we talk about topics like this and just mental health in general, we always focus on like the more negative aspects of it. But one of the positive aspects of, I don't want to say coming to college with an eating disorder because that doesn't sound great, but essentially that is you do have that space in there. It is like a 50-50 chance that they will want to get better and they've just been put in a situation and an environment growing up where they had somebody enforce like a negative relationship with food or their body. And so it is really cool to see them come to college and say, I don't think this is right. I don't think this is good for me. I want help with this. And then we spend the semester doing that and kind of prepping them for like what Thanksgiving looks like, what Christmas break looks like, and what summer break will look like, and kind of giving them those skills to make it through those periods of time at the environment in which these behaviors started.
It's interesting that you bring up the concept also of only working with them semester. So in other realms, you get to work with your clients, year round. There might be some vacations here and there, but you don't have giant chunks of time away. What's interesting too is that you highlighted that in your first answer to us. And what I've noticed with college students is it's probably the primary time that I get phone calls for college students seeking therapy, is over the holidays. And I either get it from them or their parents. So even adults, I will get calls from parents. And what I've seen on my end is what it sounds like is that the kids will go away to college, and either it gave the parents enough space to then when the kid comes home, they're like, oh my gosh, this was not good. Or maybe that individual got to college and it was one of those incidents where something triggered the switch for the ED to get worse, that when they get home, that's when I see a lot of kind of triggering to action there. It sounds too like basically their environment is going to dictate a lot once they get there, the community that they find. So if they're on that bubble, you described that 50-50 chance, are they going to find a community that's body accepting, that engages with food in a positive manner, or are they going to find a competitive environment where bodies are highlighted?
Yeah. And I have seen students who have a great group of friends who are their major support system and like will bring snacks for them and do things like that and make sure that they've eaten that day and encourage them to eat with them. And that is great. I've also seen like athletics, for example, where coaches kind of give them those eating disorder behaviors for like performance, which always kind of makes me chuckle because it does the exact opposite for performance, but you know, they don't know that. But like it's so interesting, like you said, that group of people that they surround themselves with, if they are somebody who encourages this eating disorder behavior, if there's somebody who encourages like, hey, maybe you should have a snack. Let's have dinner together. Um, it's always amazing to see how some of those things come about and like those great support systems come into play. And then it's equally as frustrating to see those support systems not be as supportive.
You mentioned coaches, so my mind went to athletes. Would you say there's a certain community or a certain population of college students that might be more predisposed or susceptible to eating disorders, like Greek life, athletes, students in the arts? What do you think?
I do think athletes are a huge population that I don't want to say isn't necessarily thought about in terms of eating concerns, but I think that they are a population where it's mostly focused on performance and everything else comes second. And they are a large population who do typically present with eating concerns. And I mean, I know we look at and we all talk about like dancing, cheerleading, gymnastics, swimming, kind of like those more body focused wrestling, those body focused sports. I have seen a lot, especially like over the last like 5 years, football and soccer have been so high and they're like sneaky sports. They're like little sneaky eating disorder sports. And because it's not what you think of when you think of an eating disorder. I have heard of football coaches encouraging their players to eat a lot because if they're on an offensive or defensive line, they need to make the blocks and make the plays and make the performances. And the bigger they are, the easier it is to do that. And then when they go and retire, it's they're in kind of a spot where they're used to this, and then it's their health is called into play. And it's a lot of different moving parts that you don't really think about because it's football and it's not that body focused sport as much as like dancing and cheerleading and swimming and wrestling.
I think you bring up a really good point when it comes to things like football, because you're right. It's not something that your brain would think of immediately of what community probably experiences eating disorders or problematic behaviors around food. I'm glad you brought that up because I was an athlete myself at a college. And I remember actually the football players discussing how much they needed to eat. And at first, we were kind of like, oh, poor you, you've got to eat a lot. However, then as we learned more, you really are expected to really push past your fullness cues to attain gaining weight at a certain speed and measure. And that is something that it sounds like, it doesn't sound like, at least in the community you're discussing, that then they were taught, hey, what is your relationship with food life, or like with food like upon, termination from your sport? Um, how have you found that coaches have responded to their athletes being treated under your guys' care? Are they a part of the treatment team? Are they engaged with the eating disorder work?
Not well. And that's the tough part is because we're coming from two totally separate worlds, trying to mend those relationships and mend kind of the understanding of like, I know that you want that peak performance, and so do I. We're on the same team. It just looks like we're fighting against each other because we're recommending two different things. And we have on our eating disorder treatment team, we have a dietitian and we have a medical provider who I work with very closely. But we also have a graduate student in nutrition who works specifically over in athletics. And he comes into our treatment teams and we kind of all kind of go on that same page, and he's like our bridge. So he sees them every day. The students themselves are more comfortable interacting with him, but so are the coaches because they see him every day and he's not a stranger to them. And we're not a stranger to him. So he's like, let me link you guys up together. And so that's been really helpful, but it's definitely like it's us against them and them against us rather than the two of us against the problem. And that's the part where it gets kind of difficult.
Wow. What about in Greek life? What do you notice?
Greek life is, again, one of those sneaky ones. It's not as prominent as athletics. And it's one of those things where they will keep things very much so under wraps until they cannot. And usually when they come in and we catch it, it's for something else. They're coming in for anxiety or depression or a trauma. And we're like, in our intake, we ask about eating concerns. And that's when we'll be like, huh, that's that's an interesting thing that you just brought up. And that's kind of how we catch Greek life. We also work with a sorority who's philanthropic um goal. I was never in a sorority. I don't know that part, but like they work with eating disorders. And so they work with us on like our major events, being National Eating Disorder Awareness Week. And they will come in and do like tabling with us and events with us and activities with us, which is super nice to see. I feel like that's not something that I've heard of in the 45 years that I've been in a college setting, like as a student myself or in as like a professional. So that's really nice to see. And like they do all their fundraising for eating disorder awareness, but they're sneaky. We catch them for something else, and it's not necessarily like athletics where it's very much so out in the open.
When I was working in college counseling, a lot of the presenting problems that I would get would be substance use, actually, instead of the eating disorder.
Mhm.
So, when I was working with sorority women, they would be J-boarded, which is basically, hey, something's going on with you, you need some extra support. Maybe they got in trouble, and they would be sent to college counseling, and it would usually be for their alcohol use. And then when I would assess for eating, it was typically because they weren't eating before they were going out and they were getting excessively intoxicated and then getting into trouble, maybe having to get their stomach pumped, etc. And when we were able to look at the reciprocal relationship between substance use and eating, the eating disorder really slips in there. And sometimes the substance use looks like the bigger problem, but really the eating disorder is pushing it.
Yeah.
I think what both of you guys are highlighting right now is that eating disorders are just so secretive that people are willing to come in and seek help and say, I need help with my anxiety. I need help with my depression. Maybe even I need help with my substance use. But that eating disorder, it does not seem to be, let me tell you about my eating problems. Maybe occasionally, but for the most part, you guys are even using terms of like, that's how we catch it. And it makes it sound like it's this entity that needs to be caught. And most of the time it is. And I think that's really important for listeners to hear, is that eating disorders are so good at camouflaging. They are so good, and they will hide behind other diagnoses. Eating disorders are highly comorbid with other diagnosable disorders, and we cannot forget to assess, even if somebody presents for something seemingly way different, we need to be assessing these individuals for eating disorder pathology as well.
And it's one of those things where like I'll do presentations or something, and a lot of professors actually have requested like, how do we catch if somebody's struggling? And I feel like I give everybody kind of the same little tidbit, is like, and it goes the same I think for eating disorders too, is like, if something is different from how somebody is normally acting, it wouldn't hurt to check in. It wouldn't hurt to provide resources. Like if somebody wears sweatpants to class every day and all of a sudden they're dressing like full hair, full makeup, full like jeans. I don't know. Jeans are dressing up for me. Like, I don't know. Especially in college, woof. If I wore jeans to class, it was a good day. But like if somebody was sweatpants all year and now they're full hair, full makeup, jeans, a cute sweater, like that's different from the norm. And then a lot of people would not think anything of that because that seems like it's a positive trend, but it's different. So it might not hurt to check in, even if it is a positive trend, say like, hey, what's up? Like, how you doing? And I think that's the same for eating disorders. Like you might be able to pick up on something and then also notice this difference. And noticing that difference might also be easier in terms of having that conversation with this person that you care about, whether that is a friend, a roommate, a partner, even just, a classmate that you have Monday, Wednesday, Friday at noon, you sit next to in class. Like going about that change might be an easier way to enter the topic than saying, do you eat? Do you do these things?
Yeah, it feels more accusatory when you're saying it in that way, which actually brings me to my next question. What are some subtle early signs of disordered eating that you typically see in college students?
The thing that I hear so often, so much, is I don't have time to eat. I forgot. I was so busy, I forgot. And that it might be 100% true. Maybe they are running around. I get it. I was active in college. I was going from here to there to there to there. And that's sometimes just how college is. It's go, go, go. The thing that's that I forgot or I didn't have time, sometimes that is a quick psychoeducational thing where it's like, what does a meal look like for you? What are ways that we can kind of incorporate food outside of that? Like, this is a meal. I have to sit down and eat it. Like, this is breakfast, this is lunch, this is dinner, and this is what they look like. But a lot of times, that's how students with disordered eating or eating disorder behaviors will like camouflage those things. Well, I didn't have time. I don't have time to eat on Tuesdays and Thursdays because I have class and then I have work and then I have this extracurricular and then it's 10 o'clock at night.
It sounds like even the risk factor is kind of like a standard day in college, which is kind of scary because as you said that answer, I remember in college being pretty darn busy all day long, and that is a perfect excuse for an eating disorder to grab hold of and be like, well, we didn't have time. And I think that you bring up a very good point that when people think about their eating patterns, they're like, I didn't have time for a meal. Well, you probably had a 30-minute walk to class. Could we have had something that's grab and go that actually would meet the nutritional requirements for a meal? And the answer is yes, we can. But eating disorders don't want individuals to know that. Right. So I think it's really interesting that the subtle warning sign you noted is probably one of the most common college experiences, which also just kind of shows that everybody in the same environment is going to respond differently.
And normally, like, we'll follow that up with, like, well, what would it look like to do X, Y, and Z? And how they respond to that is usually like where we can differentiate, like, oh, this is just something that they haven't thought about. And because they're set in what a meal looks like, or this is something that they are shooting down everything that we are trying to bring up. And so this is probably a bigger issue.
So the resistance might be indicative of an eating disorder.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very important sentence that Zoe just said, that the resistance might be indicative of an eating disorder itself. I'm curious, you bring up being so busy and walking to classes. I have a couple questions almost pertaining to movement. So do you find that kind of the walking lifestyle could impact or influence eating disorder pathology, or also even the presence of usually a campus rec and wellness center?
So it's so interesting that you bring up the rec center because our student health center, which is where our CAPS office is, our CAPS office is on the second floor, medical is on the first floor, and attached to that is the rec center. And so it's very close. And I have a lot of clients, not even just my eating disorder clients, but a lot of clients in general say like, "Oh, I just came from the rec," or after our session, I'm gonna go work out. And it's they all get that membership for free as like a college student, right? That's one of the perks that they sell you when you're doing the tours. Like you get all access to this rec wellness center. And our campus is huge. And outside of the college that I went to, a lot of the colleges that I have worked at, went to, they are bigger, they're more spread out. So it does take a lot of walking. And it's one of those things where I have had some clients who look at that and they're like, oh, well, if I have to walk from this side of campus to this side of campus, I can burn X amount of calories. And that means that I can have this banana. That means I can have pizza when I get home tonight. Or if I walk from this class to this class to this task to this task, and then I go work out, I can eat whatever I want. And it's takes a lot of like backpedaling and saying like, whoa, let's slow down for a second. Why do you have to do all that to have this? What makes you think that way? What makes that true for you versus if you just had it and sat on your couch all day? What's the difference there? And a lot of that, it's breaking a lot of that down, but the walking and the access to the rec does exacerbate some of these things that are already there.
When I was working in college counseling, I noticed that the rec center was also a place of socialization. And it was a place where you connected with your friends. Oh, we'll go on a mom walk. We'll go to the gym together. So simultaneously, it can be a great form of connection with your peers. And then for folks with eating disorder pathology, it can be an incredibly scary place, a competitive place, and get in the way of you making these connections because the eating disorder strips that of you.
Yeah. And I have found that a lot of my eating disorder clients go work out alone and do things that they feel they should be doing. And I always latch on to the should word. And as much as I tell my clients, I am not an English girly, I don't know English, we focus a lot on words in our session because words have such an impact. And the word should, we always talk about adds pressure. It's not something that you want to do or you like to do, you feel like you have to do it. And that feeling of pressure and having to do it brings a lot of these emotions about like guilt if you don't. And where we're looking at, oh, well, like I should be lifting weights or I should be running 5 miles. Do you like to do that? And a lot of the times the answer is no. And so then we work on like, well, what would moving your body look like if it's something that you liked to do versus what you feel like you should be doing? Because a lot of times too, I find that my clients latch on to working out and don't necessarily want to give that up. And so we work with them on reducing, but also changing it into something that isn't like a have to, you have to do this 7 days a week, like they think and that their eating disorder voice is telling them. But what do you like to do? What movement makes you feel good?
You're highlighting that there are a lot of shoulds when it comes to college life, specifically as it could pertain to eating disorder pathology. So there's some shoulds of I should do my homework because I do have, that class tomorrow. I should study because I have that exam. I should go work out because that's what all of the people in my sorority or athletic, crew are doing. Um, I should walk to this class and not take the bus because, as you highlighted earlier, that could influence my eating patterns later. How do you feel like the overall life in college pertaining to should, so whether it's social media, sorority pressures, athletic pressures, how do you feel like those combinations influence the overall pathology of the diagnoses?
Oh my gosh, so much. So much. And I'm glad that you brought up social media because TikTok is one of the things that I hear about so often. And like these influencers or fitfluencers or all of like the lingo that the kids are bringing up these days. But it's you get it from all sides. You get it in person, you get it through your phone, which we always have on us. Let's be so real. Like our phones are always attached to us. We always have access to see somebody that we can compare ourselves to. If that's going to class, walking to class, taking the bus, walking or being in like the rec center, even just opening up your phone, going on Instagram, going on TikTok. Instagram is one of those things, social media in general is one of those things that we put out what we want people to see. And it's usually our best selves. And it's usually us being like, look at me and all these great things that I'm doing. It's never those like, I feel like crap and things are not going my way. And especially with TikTok, I myself get sucked into like what I eat in a day. And I get sucked into those videos and I watch them. And I have enough educational background and knowledge to look at that and be like, that's not enough. And that is something that maybe isn't realistic to everybody because I don't work from home, or that might not be what your typical day looks like. This is just a snapshot of one day that you choreographed, right? That's essentially what a TikTok is. But not everybody can separate it like that, especially when you have an active eating disorder voice telling you everybody else is doing this and you're not doing this, and that makes you less than.
I love that word choreographed because it really details that it's a performance. And that's what social media is. So that sentence you said of we always have access to something that allows us to compare ourselves to other people with our phones. Well, we're comparing ourselves to performance. It's very curated. And that's not what humans are. That's not how we can live 100% of our life. It's impossible to bloom 100% of the time. But social media says that we have to, or that we should be that way, going back to that should word. And I was thinking also within college students, the vernacular that you have to even learn is a different language. So like no cap. So one of my students said like bet, and I was like, what does that mean? And it's like there's so many different words you have to learn to keep up with this community.
Yes. And I tell my clients, especially because I'm not hip with the kids. I was not hip with the kids when I was the kids. I'm just not. And there are some things that I can pick up through like context clues of their whole sentence. And some things I'm just like, what? Like, what does that mean? And they're like, oh my God, Haley. And I'm like, girl, I don't know. I don't know. Can you break it down for me? What does that mean? And then I'll get it. But like somebody said bop the other day, and to me, a bop is like music. Like that song is a bop, like it's a good song. That's not what she meant. That is not what she meant. And I said, hold on, because my context of that word does not make sense in this sentence. What do you mean? And it was like a hoe behavior. Like, and I was like, what? What? So yeah, she's like, Haley, come on. And I'm like, okay, I got it from here on out. You're good. But like, ma'am,
What you just identified is that working with the college community, you need to know what's going on in their lives. You need to know what's going on in their pop culture because linguistics are so important to know what the words mean so you truly have an understanding. And also, you need to know what words they're seeing on social media. So, you brought up what I eat in a day. So, I'm going to tell you right now, if you're watching this video on social media, if you look down, it probably has hashtagged what I eat in a day because we're trying to direct viewers away from those videos because they are highly choreographed videos of what I eat in a day. There is nobody fact checking these individuals of did you actually eat this? So one, they could be performing, under putting food out there because for some reason society has deemed that as a positive badge. I don't know why, but it has. Or I'll see a lot of what I eat in a day in recovery. And that I have found to be incredibly damaging when I'm working with particularly this age range of clients, because they'll be like, well, they're eating this, and then they compare it to their own meal plan. And again, what I tell them is one, did somebody fact check them or could they do whatever the heck they wanted? Then I'm like, okay, and does their eating disorder maybe have a motive in posting this video? And it's harsh, but we have to remember that. But I think knowing what's going on in their linguistics, knowing what's going on in their social media, the media that they're taking in, they can consume for hours a day. We see them once a week. They're taking in that media, so we need to know what's going on. It's the biggest thing I think I've seen with providers. Sometimes if I bring up certain things on social media, they'll straight up say, "What?" And I'm like, you need to get on TikTok, unfortunately, and you need to type in some of these hashtags because if you type them in, it's pretty rough out there. So I'm glad that you highlight that we need to stay hip with the kids. And I can totally relate to that, that it's a challenge, that it's not my natural go-to, but we've got to pay just as close attention, and as we do to our pathology, our diagnoses, and our treatment planning, we have to pay that close attention to what are they consuming in media as well.
And I think too, like being able to talk to them about like TikToks that you've seen or TikToks they've seen helps you build that rapport. And that rapport will then help them feel more comfortable in being like, okay, I know we're on session like 25, but I have been having this behavior since way before I started coming in here. But now they feel comfortable. And that could come from like that TikTok that was like, oh, very demure, very cutesy, very mindful. And just having that like brief interaction with them where they're like, oh, like you're kind of cool. And I'm like, oh, yes, I am. And that kind of helps them feel comfortable in that space and that you are somebody that's like a safe person for them because you watch TikToks too. You're a person and not like the therapist.
You mentioned 25 sessions. My college counseling experience was not that. So we were an access model, and it was 1 to maybe 8 to 12 sessions, if that. So if you are someone seeking support through your college counseling center, you might have to terminate with that therapist at some point and find a long-term therapist. So don't be shocked if that experience happens for you, where either you graduate or the free services wrap up. You might have to find a different provider who specializes in eating disorders, and really utilize your college counseling center to get those resources because they can be hard to find.
Yeah. And I am very lucky to work in a space right now that anybody who presents with an eating concern gets these unlimited sessions.
Wow.
So we do have the time to work with them because we recognize that it is a slower process, right? It's not going to be like, oh, one and done. You came in, we talked about these things, and you're like, oh, that makes so much sense. You're right. Let me go change all these things. It's slow and it has its bumps and dips and all of these things. And that's not the case everywhere. And I do think a lot of that comes from where I am. We are in a very rural area, and there are not a lot of providers just in general to refer out to, especially eating disorder providers. So we do kind of keep everybody unless they need that higher level of care or until they need that higher level of care, depending on how you want to look at that. But it is not the case everywhere. And I think sometimes that can be conveyed as like I did something wrong in having this high pathology and I did something wrong where now I have to be referred out because I wasn't fixable or I wasn't cured, and that can exacerbate those things even more.
I'm glad we're discussing the idea of a transfer of care or terminating with a therapist and starting up with another one. A lot of people don't realize that it's not about how many letters are behind somebody's name that dictates how well a therapist is going to help you. The most important thing is the therapeutic relationship. So if you're not feeling connected to your therapist, if you're not feeling as if you guys have established a positive rapport, then it is totally acceptable to be able to move forward. And I hope that there can be more accessibility. So that's an option. And also, though, if we're talking about just a higher level of care transition, I see that a lot with my clients too. They almost feel like a failure if they feel like they failed outpatient. And I think that people need to hear it is like everybody's story one looks completely different. There is no norm on if you go to higher level of care or not and all those things, but it is okay. And all that that means is that your pathology requires a different skill set or maybe at even a different rate. Maybe these skills are working, but you need more support. It doesn't mean that you failed. It just means that your eating disorder is requiring more consistent attacking, more consistent combating of what it's doing. And I think that there's such a stigma and there's also such a fear. So the media portrays things like psych wards. Oh my goodness, in a manner that sure, there might be some places across the country that could mirror that presentation. And also specifically, eating disorder units also typically look kind of different. But I have found that media has really scared a lot of my clients, a lot, or social media. So people post a lot about their treatment experience, specifically on TikTok. And I found that to be very scary as well. So it's important yourself as a provider, if you don't work in higher level of care, to have a very clear understanding of what that looks like so you can truly eloquently explain to your clients what they could expect, what they really would be getting into, what their days would look like, not just what they found in either media or social media.
That's such a great point. And I don't lie to my clients in that, hey, going to higher level of care might be tough. It's going to challenge you, it's going to challenge your eating disorder. And also, you are going to meet so many people who truly understand what you're going through. In no other community will you be able to look to the person to the left of you and say, oh gosh, you get it. I have never had a client say, you know, Zoe, I wish I waited to go to higher level of care. It has always been, I should have gone earlier.
I think
And
that's a huge thing that I tell my clients as well is I have yet to have a client say, why did you send me? And I have sent some people that, let's just say, they didn't go skipping into treatment or their higher level of care. And even those individuals, I have not seen somebody regret that experience. I'm very honest as well. And I state there's going to be a lot of hard things. There's going to be a lot. And I'm not saying that you're going to love every day, specifically the first 3 days. Um, but what I also echo that same thing, Zoe, that you're going to be at a table where everybody understands you. Right now, you might go to your family of origins table and nobody gets it. You're the one that's worried about your food, worried about your body, worried about your exercise level, and everybody else is just enjoying a meal. You'll be at a table where everybody understands. So I believe that outpatient has its own place. I believe higher level of care has its own place, but I don't believe we need to weaponize any of them. And I hope that if anybody's listening to this can understand that a level of care does not dictate success, and it also doesn't dictate severity. So I have had I work with some high acuity clients with anorexia, and I have actually had some people be able to um, move through treatment in an outpatient manner, where on initial presentation you might not think so. I've also seen some people show up in a presentation that you might think, oh, perfect for outpatient, and they require a higher level. So level of care does not dictate severity of disorder, and level of care also does not dictate your level of success with treatment. It just dictates what your story looked like.
Haley, how do you see college impacting people's comfort going to higher level of care?
it is really tough, especially if it's mid-semester. A lot of, and it's not just like I don't want to leave mid-semester because, I have class. A lot of it sometimes pertains to like scholarships and how they might be able to attend college in the future if they take this leave of absence. And I have had to learn a lot about the difference of like a medical leave of absence and how that impacts financial aid and scholarships and things like that versus like if you just decided to not come back for a semester and how that dictates like financial aid and scholarships. And because they come in with questions, and the first time I had that, I was like, I have no idea. I'm so sorry. Like I don't know. And so that was a question I brought to my supervisor. And then I did my own research to kind of give them more of an idea of what this might look like if you leave mid-semester, if you leave at the end of the semester, and things like that. I did have a client come to me saying that she thought she needed a higher level of care. We did all this, and she's like, I don't know if I can go right now because I'm have to pay back X, Y, and Z because it's mid-semester. And like, can we stick it out for the rest of this semester? And she did. And we kind of set up some stuff in our office that allowed her to be able to do that. But a lot of different things with college come into play because it's such an expensive venture. And I didn't think about that until that happened. And then my client was like, I don't know if I can do that.
Wow, you just identified that college is probably one of the biggest barriers you could have to going to a higher level of care because theoretically you could lose a scholarship. Theoretically, you could lose your funding. You could lose the finances you've already spent on that semester. That sounds like just like an eating disorder's dream to me to have that environment because look at all the very real barriers that are there. Do you feel like there are adequate measures in place to where people can make those transitions?
I do think that we work with the clients as best as we can to set them up with something that is sustainable until they have that like break period. Um, And if it is something that is absolutely necessary at that point in time, that we've probably prolonged it and now it like you have to go. A medical leave of absence is something that looks a little bit different. There's paperwork that has to be filled out, mountains of it. But we we have groups that are like skills groups that are set up to allow them to get more than a once a week therapy. And that is helpful if we can make it to the end of the semester. And then kind of, I like to offer that to my clients, any clients with eating concerns, to set them up with a skills group as well. So that it helps maybe prevent that. Like we have to start looking at higher levels of care and what that might look like. But it's, it is such a barrier, like you said, and sometimes it is so heartbreaking to
So
recognize that.
I don't want to speak for Zoe here, but I think when we invited you on, Dr. Haley Johnson, for working in a college setting, I didn't personally expect you to share in the way that you have how your resources are so available to your students. I mean, you're talking about having multitudes of sessions, you're helping them to see a therapist or have therapeutic support more than one time a week. I would like to give a shout out basically to the college you work for, because that was not my expectation having you on. I had heard kind of what Zoe had shared about, very limited sessions. So it sounds like colleges differ from campus to campus on how these resources are accessible. That is actually very, very refreshing to hear for where I'm sitting. But it really sounds like you guys are able to create an environment that is suitable for that. And that actually just makes me very happy to hear. And I'm grateful for the work that you guys are doing there. But have you heard the differences from other colleges? Do you believe that this is standard, or do you guys have more support?
So,
I
oh, go for it,
Oh,
Haley.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
So, when you are applying for your pre-doctoral internship, you apply to different settings, and Haley and I predominantly applied to college counseling centers. And even with that, we were able to see the type of care each college was able to provide. So where I matched on internship, it was an access model. We'll get you in, we figure out what's going on, then we move you to the next provider, hopefully planting the seed to get you to feel comfortable going to long-term care. So what I'm gathering from this conversation is if you are going into college and you are struggling with an eating disorder, it might be important to look at your resources in your university. Because, hey, if you have the financial means to be able to get a long-term care provider, awesome. If not, maybe we need to look at a university that might give you more care through your college counseling centers.
Yeah. And I think in terms of where I currently work, we want to make care as accessible as possible to all of our students who go to this school. And that might look like our eating disorder extended care model, where you don't have to worry about a session limit. You kind of just go with it. We also, our sessions are standard. We have a door fee of like $10. But if you can't pay that, we will waive it. Like there are funds to cover that. We want to make this as accessible as possible. And that also includes our dietitian, our medical provider on staff. We want to make them as accessible as possible. And that is not something that I have found everywhere. And I'm very lucky to be able to witness that it is possible and that there are places that do that. But it does come down to where the college is. Are you able to refer out to somebody else? Are there providers to do that? It depends on the education and awareness the college has on how prevalent disordered eating and eating disorders are in this population and how much they are willing to kind of share that knowledge with the campus to get others aware of that. And that is not the case everywhere. And we have put in a lot of work to expand that education beyond just like the student health center.
I'm gonna kind of put you on the spot here, Haley. What percent of college students do you feel like has a troubled relationship with food and body once they arrive on campus?
Oh my God, a lot of them. If I had to put like a number when they arrive on campus, if I had to put a number, I would say at least a quarter.
And
It's
At
after a year there,
uh, pff, After a year there, I would bump that up to maybe 45, 50.
So the actual statistic of people with eating disorders in college is 20%. So the fact that you said a quarter is nearly accurate. And 20% is a huge number. It's 1 in 5.
Yeah.
So if you are looking around your friend group and you see 5 of you, well, 1 of you is likely to have an eating disorder. And that's very significant.
What's crazy too is that so you just identified has an eating disorder. So there could be a slew of individuals that one, a lot of studies like it's based off people reporting, right? So they might not be reporting their eating disorder for that research. But two, then Haley's probably on track with that still has a problematic relationship with food and body. That is highly problematic, right? Um, what do you think, Haley, are some measures that colleges could take to help prevent either eating disorder pathology from presenting or worsening on a college campus?
Oh, there is one thing that has become a trend, and I've seen at the grad school that I went to that was not a thing when I was in undergrad and has kind of since been, I think, applied across a lot of college campuses, is putting the calories of the options available at the dining hall. And I don't believe it comes from a place of malice at all. I think it comes from a wanting an awareness. And if I am somebody who walks into the dining hall, which is already nerve-wracking, right? Because it's a lot of people that I think are paying attention to what I look like and what I'm choosing, I'm then being exposed to all of these calorie amounts that I might want, like a piece of pizza or chicken tenders or a hamburger. And I see that and it talks me out of it. Or I see that and I grab it, but then I'm mentally calculating all of these things that, okay, if I have this hamburger, that means I'm halfway to my 1,000 calorie goal. And that means I can't have X, Y, and Z later. So, like, I think that it was put out there as trying to be helpful, but I also don't think it super is. And that's one of like my biggest like pet peeves. And I don't think it's very helpful at all.
A huge difficulty for college students is that transition of how to feed yourself. You're probably going from your parents helping you build your meal plan throughout the week, or eating with your family, or at least having something prepared for you throughout the week, and then learning how do I feed myself autonomously? How do I decide when I eat, when I don't, when I'm hungry, when I'm not? And that's when an eating disorder can really slip in there because one, it kind of gives you guidelines and it gets you feeling in control rather than listening to yourself intuitively.
I can't believe that that's actually something that's on college campuses now. I'm positive that it was not there when I was in undergrad, and I really severely think that that would have impacted my experience if I was there. So I that makes it sad too that these people are not subscribing or asking for it, and I almost wish it was an option. So if you would like to subscribe to that option and see what the caloric intake, qualities are, even those don't have to be exact, everybody has to remember, but I wish it was an option. And they also don't have the option to cross it out because it sounds like it's just broadcasted. So sometimes when people go to restaurants with menus that have calorie counts, if they know they're going there, I'll tell them to bring a little expo marker, and then their family member could just expo out, all those calorie counts, and then they could erase it. If you really want to go crazy, bring a Sharpie. I don't want to go down for vandalism, but if you want to have some fun, but they don't even get that opportunity. They have to see it, and the fact it's displayed says this information is important.
Yeah.
It's something I'm going to bring up that I don't even want to emphasize, but it's something I feel like we have to talk about is the idea of a freshman 15. And what your calorie count thing just reminded me of was how prevalent that was of don't gain the freshman 15, and what these communities are saying by putting the calories on the dining halls is basically saying don't do that either. So is that something that you've heard in language come up in your work with the college community?
I feel like the phrase freshman 15 has like phased out a little bit, which is nice. The concept is still there. And we do have in the last, handful of years that I've been working with college students, we have gotten a lot of people come in their second year of college for wanting to lose weight. And not necessarily that at that point having disordered eating behavior, but having the weight that they gained impact their self-esteem, which is nice to see them come in before those behaviors start because they're feeling down about themselves. I do have a lot of conversations with the dietitian that works in our building, and she has seen a lot of like, I want to lose weight because first semester or freshman year, I gained X amount of weight, and I want to make sure that I'm eating healthy or doing those things. And so the concept is still very much so prevalent. The words associated with it are not, which I am very glad about, but um it is one of those things that from what I've seen, they come in before it becomes a big issue. A lot of students who use that like language. There are some people who suffer in silence, right? Like we talked about, it's very secretive and it's very sneaky, who try to fix it on their own first and like fix it, right? And that's where these behaviors come in. And so we might see them a little bit past sophomore year, maybe like a junior year or senior year. And then they're really much so in it.
Someone told me the quote, college turns an 18-year-old to a 22-year-old. And a lot happens in those 4 years. Your body changes, the way you metabolize changes, the way you take up space, your thinking. So many things alter during those 4 years. And yet there is such a desire to stay in the body that you came into college with. Oh, these were my high school. This is my high school weight. These are what the jeans I wore my senior year of high school. And so you were 18, you were a child then. You're 17, 18 years old. You're an adult now. Your body's going to change.
Yeah,
I
even if the language has changed, it still sounds like there's the stigma that weight gain in college equals bad.
Mhm.
And I think that that's where we need to be able to make some movements, is that weight gain just equals weight gain. Weight gain does not equal a moral value of good or bad. And I think it's really great to hear that people, and refreshing to hear that people are coming in before engaging with eating disorder pathology. But the fact that they are even enlisting in therapeutic services because they feel as if weight loss would be that important to them just kind of breaks my heart. As Zoe pointed out, ages 18 to 22, your body's supposed to change. Eating
Mhm.
disorder or not, eating disorder recovery or not, a body is going to body, and those are years it loves to.
Yeah. And a lot of times we come at it of like, what would your life be different and what would it look like if you did lose weight? How would it change? How would it be better for you? Because a lot of times, and it's something that's so common to hear is like, things would just be better if I lost weight. Well, how? What would be different? What would change? Walk me through what aspects of life would be better. And that they don't expect that. They don't expect that answer at all. And they're like, well, it just would be. And there's just that thought of if I looked different, everything would be okay. And that's what their brain is. Our brain is so annoying and so rude sometimes. And our brain lies to us always. And it's one of those things that when I have those conversations with clients, I'm like, your brain is being rude as hell right now.
Yeah, we have to wrap up. I did want to make this one last comment because I feel like it's a part of college counseling that I had never even considered before I worked in that community, is financial insecurity. So if you are working with students who might not be able to afford food, that might be another way that eating disorder capitalizes on it. So maybe the student runs out of swipes that day. Well, I can't eat. So let's figure out ways that we can increase access to food as well. And utilizing that intersecting identity lens when we are working with this community.
Yes, absolutely. It is something that is very much so prevalent. And I'm glad you brought that up.
Well,
Well,
thank you so much. Oh, Maria, we're going to say something?
I was just gonna say, Zoe, I'm so glad that you interjected that here for ending out our podcast today, because it is so important. Access to care, yes, and also access to food, and not letting that weaponize. So I appreciate you kind of bringing in that tidbit today, and I just wanted to personally thank Haley as well for joining us. Your insights have been incredible, and we've truly just enjoyed having you on. So thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Oh my God, this was so much fun. Thank you for having me.
We had so much fun having you here, gave us so much to think on, and thank you again for taking the time of being here. Let's wrap up. So wherever you are, whoever you are, come take a seat with us.